Nurah Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nurah Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nurah Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nurah Muhammad. It is a pleasure to be back with you, and I know it has been quite some time from episode 158 to episode 159, but I will explain my absence and why you have not had new episodes in nearly a month and a half or going on 2 months. But first, let me just say I'm so grateful to be back. I'm excited to be back in the Nurah Speaks podcast studio, recording, sitting in front of this microphone and speaking to my audience. I am just grateful to have this platform to be able to talk about issues that are relevant to our community, that are relevant to our community's needs. I do not take this lightly. It is a heavy, heavy responsibility. And I never want to come halfway. I always want to be able to give my all to the podcast. I want to be able to give my attention to this. It is a project that I do take very seriously. And so I did take some time and I did step away. I was in the middle of, for those who know a little bit about me, those who know my bio and my background and what I do in my own local community. I participated in a local election here in my home city, and there was some campaigning that I was involved in, and it was a project that I fully immersed myself in, striving to give 100% of myself to that because I committed to it. And I was dedicated to that work. And so I'm also committed to and dedicated to this podcast. And I recognize that I really, really couldn't do both at 100%. And so I stepped away for a little while from the microphone, from the podcast, because so much was required of me and of my time. And as I said, I never want to do things halfway. And I felt my energy just kind of draining. And, even if I'm honest, in my last episode 158, I could feel that my energy wasn't what it should be. It wasn't the energy that I'm comfortable with or that I was used to bringing to the podcast and approaching each episode and preparing. And so this podcast, it does take quite a bit of energy. It takes quite a bit of work and labor. I mean, the recording is probably the easy part, but it's the work that goes before the recordings, the work that happens after the recording. And so just being so heavily involved in, my other project and with the campaign of our soon-to-be mayor here in my city. I'm happy that I had the opportunity to work on this campaign in the way that I did, to have my candidate move forward in the primary, and I'm confident that we will move forward in the general election. But because I value you, I didn't want to just kind of come on the microphone halfway, without the energy that I usually bring, without the thoughtfulness that I usually bring. And so to do justice to both projects, the podcast and to the campaign, then I stepped away from the podcast for a short while. But I was still working, and I was working quite a bit. It's quite exhausting. Anyone who's worked on a campaign, that it does require quite a bit of energy. And, and I talked about folks getting involved in their local elections and and what should be expected of our local elected officials, what we should expect from our government. And I always emphasize, in spite of government, in spite of politicians, in spite of local or national elected officials, what is our responsibility? What is our responsibility as homeowners, as residents, as community members, as neighbors, as parents? What is our responsibility to our community? How can we support those that we elect into office? How can we hold those that we elect into office accountable? There's so much that is required of us, and sometimes when we are looking at those who hold the political office, then we, kind of want them to do everything for us, and they can do some for us, but the greatest thing that they can do is give us opportunities, and create avenues, or get rid of blockades to opportunity. And that's what we want from our local government. We want opportunity. And as a Muslim, specifically as a follower of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, we want we want an opportunity, rather, to be able to do something for ourselves. And, we want to support those who are interested in assisting us to do something for self. We're not, as followers of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, I'm in Camden, New Jersey. I'm a member of Temple number 20. My minister is Brother Minister Wasim Muhammad. And yes, we do engage in the local politics here, but we know that's a very, very small part, very, very small part to what we see as the solution to the problems that our people face. However, because there's a local municipality, because there's a county government, because there's a state government and a federal government, then we know that they all play a part. But the greatest part, the most responsibility that one would bear, is that of a citizen, of a resident, as a homeowner, as someone who is in a household, as a community member, as a parent. What can we do, one, to support those in elected office, also to show them the work that we're doing to create a pathway for ourselves. And then we have the opportunity to say, but we also need help here, or we also want this opportunity over there. We don't want them to do everything for us. We just want an opportunity to shoot our shot and do something for self. So, I gave quite a bit, and I'm willing to give more, because I believe in serving our interests and doing what we can and what I should do to meet the needs of our community. And, one thing that I've stressed before, and I don't think that we can emphasize too much, is to be mindful that when we are opponents in a campaign, or opponents in an election, or opponents on the basketball court, on the football field, then we're just opponents, but we're not enemies. And so if we are here sharing, citizenship or residency in a particular town, and your candidate or my candidate didn't get in, well, we're not we're not enemies, we're just opponents. And so now that the campaign is over, or the election is over, then we can get back to the work that has to be done on the ground, because again, our electeds can't do everything. They can do a part and they can contribute, but the greatest impact is what we can provide. And so, we're just coming out of the primary election in New Jersey anyway, and we're going to be going into a general election in November. And I would encourage you to get involved and to understand the platforms and positions of those candidates that are going to be seeking office, especially in those local arenas, whether that's the school board, whether that's your local city council, whether that's your county commissioners. Get involved, see who they are, because it's those people who are closest to us that can create the greatest impact in terms of what's happening with our schools, what's happening with our streets, what's happening with our local taxes. So get involved and know their platforms, but please do not fall asleep because they're there to serve the residents, but the residents have to play a part too. And so there's something that we can do, we should do, and we must do for ourselves. And so that is why I was away. And it's quite a journey um and I've had quite a journey in my life, but it's quite a journey to have this podcast. And like I said, I just feel so good to be speaking with you. I'm just so happy to be back in the studio. And I'm privileged. I really am, that not only do I have the opportunity and the invitation to contribute locally, but I also have the opportunity and the invitation to contribute on a state and a federal level. Nationally, I'm invited to make a contribution, and I'm just so thankful to God, who I call Allah. I'm so thankful to Allah to have the opportunity, but more importantly, that when I get the opportunity, then I have something to say. And so again, welcome to episode 159. And this episode, actually, the subject for this episode came to me, maybe about a month ago. I was at work, actually, and I had collected some files from one office in my department in the state, in the central area of the state of New Jersey, and I was bringing them to another office in the southern state. And, because of COVID, many of us have had too much time to sit still. And I had to bring some boxes from my car into the building. And so I parked my car outside and, in front of the sidewalk. And I have a cart that I use, and I left the cart by the door of the building, because that way I would be forced to, carry the boxes, and they weren't heavy, but to carry the boxes from my car to the door, just, give me more steps to walk, if you will. And so as I was going back and forth, at one point, an older gentleman, an older black gentleman said to me, he said, "Hey, do you need help?" He was just walking down the street. And I said, "No, I got it." And then I said, "Oh no." And so I said, "Well, we've been sitting down so long because of COVID. I just wanted to go back and forth to give myself a little bit of exercise." And he laughed and I laughed, and he said, "Yeah, I understand." And he went about his way. And I just thought, man, Nurah, here it is, an older black man sees a woman, back and forth with these boxes. He doesn't know if they're heavy, but they weren't. And he offered to help. And I declined him that opportunity. And for me to say, "No, I got it," it was so reflexive. I didn't think twice. Now, if he wasn't there, I would have taken care of it. I had no problem. I remember I parked away from the door on purpose so I could walk back and forth. But I denied a man an opportunity, or that man an opportunity to help. And I just think about how, some men feel and what they think when they see us women carrying things and, lumbering down the sidewalk or through a store, carrying something awkward or heavy and wanting to help, and the woman declines it. And I was thinking at that moment, boy, this "I got it" mentality. This is a terrible mentality. And I know that, that wasn't the first time I've been guilty of saying, "No, I got it." I've said it before. And it's something that I try to stop myself from saying, because like I said, it's just so reflexive. And I think that as black women, we have this "I got it" mentality because we don't always anticipate that there's going to be help. Sometimes we don't welcome help. Sometimes we take on that isolation or solitude of doing it by ourselves. And I think there's several reasons, why we do that. However, when there's an opportunity for us to get help and to have support, then we should take it. And so that's what I want to talk about in this episode, that I got it mentality. And so first I would say, as Black women, we must begin to accept help. This doing it all on our own, that is no good. And, I came up in the 80s and in the 90s, as a teenager, as a child and as a teenager. And then in the 2000s, and you're familiar with this, from I say maybe mid to late 90s into the early 2000s, this independent Black woman, she came storming out, this independent Black woman, this Black woman who didn't need any man. And it almost became a badge of honor to promote oneself as being an independent Black woman. Now, I have to say, I can't think of any other group of women who sort of wore that as a badge of honor. Now, the fact that you may be alone, you may be by yourself and you're doing it by yourself, that may just, for some women, for other women, just be a matter of circumstance. However, for us, it was almost as if, it was an award, and I found that to be very damaging, the language and the attitude to promote this independent Black woman. And I remember Neo came out with this song, and I don't know the title of it, but he was singing about, she's got her own, and that may be the title. And I remember thinking, wow, it's gotten so bad that this young brother is singing a song glorifying this woman who has her own. Again, not that there's anything wrong with her having her own, but I think it also promotes the idea of not needing a man, not having the opportunity to depend on a man. And I know that this can be a very, very touchy subject for some women. I don't need no man. I don't want to depend on a man. And I know that our relationship with Black men has been rocky, has been troubling. Their relationship with us, our relationship with them. And we have quite a bit of work to do. But I have sons, and I think, men need to be needed, right? It's essential to them to be able to contribute, to lead, to guide, to provide. I mean, that's just essential. That's foundational for men. And I'm listening to this young brother sing a song, glorifying how this woman has her own. And I'm thinking, well, what do you bring to the table, and what does she need you for? Don't you want to be needed? I mean, I think in the song he even says she doesn't need me, and I think that that's just a song, but it's also reflective of the division in our families and in our communities. We have Black women walking down the street carrying heavy bags, saying, I got it. However, if there is assistance, why don't we take it? So let's talk about that. Why don't we take assistance when it's there? I think about work. I mean, this can happen in so many facets of life. And thinking about work, and there's a work project or some kind of business that you're attending to, and sometimes when there's the opportunity for support and assistance, we decline it because it may be our pride, right? And our pride is too big to acknowledge that we do need help, that we do need support, as if needing help or needing support is some kind of failure on our part, or we're afraid to admit that we may have a limitation in experience, in our skill set, or in our knowledge. So sometimes it's pride. We decline support after tragedy or after very difficult life circumstances. We have this strong upper lip, this, I'll push on and I'll persevere, but that comes at a cost, right? After a tragic death, after a tragic accident, after a health crisis, we are very uncomfortable with wanting help, with needing help, with asking for help, with accepting support. So it comes after some kind of life difficulty or circumstances where we'll say, no, 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 I got it. Now, I know in some cases where there's been a death, people say to you or say to me, let me know if you need anything. Well, of course you need a lot. You might not know exactly what it is that you need. So sometimes it's good for people just to jump in, bring a casserole, bring some flowers, come out, cut the grass and trim the hedges. It may be difficult for someone to say that they need help in a time such as that. And again, when there's difficulty like that, it could be difficult kind of expressing what's needed. But then we also don't want to be a burden. We don't want to, to put anybody out, right? We don't want to make anybody go out of their way, as if Black women, we're not worthy of that. As if Black women, we're not worthy of being a burden or putting somebody out, having somebody go out of their way. We are entitled to some effort on our behalf, aren't we? And so sometimes I question, do we not think that we're entitled to support? Do we not think that we're deserving of someone to go the extra mile for us? Now, we will go the extra mile for everybody. I mean, how many times have we heard about Black women, saving democracy, right? And boy, the Black women came through again. And boy, the Black women are the backbone of the Democratic Party. So we hear this about the Black woman. We hear Black women being the backbone of the Black community, which I hate to hear, but that's another show. So the Black woman is there for others. What is it about us that we don't think others should be there for us? What is it about us that we don't accept? We push away help when it comes. What is it that we think about ourselves, or what don't we think about ourselves? So this is something that we have to put under examination. The mental health, I'm glad now that we're talking about mental health in the Black community more than we did in the past, because it is important and it's essential. The same way that if you had a tummy ache or if you had a toothache, you go to the doctor, you go to the dentist. Well, sometimes when we are having strange thoughts or we're more sad than we think is normal, or we're more grieved than we think is normal, we should ask for help. We should seek mental health the same way we seek dental health, and same way we seek physical health. I will say that that's something too that we push off. We'll make sure our children go to the doctor, we'll make sure our husbands may go to the doctor, but we don't always go to the doctor. So we have to take care of our mental health, and that means opening up and talking about things and accepting support even for our mental health. Now, just getting back to us denying our men the opportunity to support us, that I got it mentality, that is very, very problematic. And there are implications of a attitude that no help is needed, right? So if a man whose nature is to want to help, what does that do for the dynamic of the male and for the female, right? I mean, we should want support. We should seek support. And this isn't because we're less than. It's not about, the man being more significant than the woman. But it is part of our nature, right? I mean, just think about the physicality, right? I'm carrying, a heavy bag or a heavy box. Why not unburden myself by allowing assistance from somebody who's much stronger than me. Why not? So when we have this I got it mentality and we push away the support and the assistance of our men, that does something to our demeanor. That does something to our posture. It changes our attitude. It changes our countenance. As women, Black women specifically, we have this sturdiness. We have this strength. We take on this domineering personality. And in that, we lose our softer side. We lose our feminine side. And that also impacts our men. We see where Black women are a little more domineering at times, and we see Black men who are a little more subservient at times. Well, this is a very, 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 very unnatural dynamic. I mean, just think about how that contradicts our physicality, right? It's strange that we would have a man that's subservient, but yet is physically stronger. That we would have a woman who is dominant, but yet that is physically weaker. So our roles have been changed. Our roles have been somewhat reversed. And we know that our experience for 400 years certainly has impacted this. And so if we don't recognize it, then we don't have the opportunity to change it or to address it. And so that's why when that man said, "Do you need help?" and I said, "No, I got it." I said, "Oh, Nurah, messed up. Could have given that Black man the satisfaction of supporting me with those boxes," right? And so sometimes I think, is it that we don't want to give a man the quote satisfaction of helping us? And so if it is that we don't want to give a Black man the quote satisfaction of helping us, what is it that we think about our men that we would deny them the opportunity to help? Is it that we dislike them? Is it that we resent them? Because, there's the martyr mentality that many Black women take on. Well, we'll do and we'll do and we'll do. We'll be like a mule and we'll work and we'll work and we'll work, but then we'll resent that we do it all. I got to do it all. Well, you said you didn't need help. You said you got it on your own. So now that I'm letting you, why are you upset? So we can unburden ourselves. We don't need all of the stress physically that we take on, especially when we have support, especially when we have help. So just, your sister Nurah here, I'm going to encourage you. If a man asks for your help, or excuse me, if a man asks to help, allow the help. Allow the help. Be a woman. Be a woman and enjoy and be appreciative that the man thinks enough of you, sister, that he doesn't want you to do more than you should. Allow the help. And then sometimes ask for help. Sometimes they need reminders. Brother, could you help me with this? Brother, could you carry this? I know that there have been times where things needed to be moved or lifted, and I'm looking at the men. Because you don't want me to do it, do you, sir? Brother, could you? Can you help? Remind them, because maybe they've come up with women who said, I got it. Maybe it was their mothers or their aunts, and maybe they're not in the mind of helping women because of the we're all equal mentality that society has taken. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not equal. I don't want to be equal with a man. I want equality, but I don't want to be equal with a man because I shouldn't be able to lift. I don't want to have to lift the same amount of weight that men do. I want to be a woman, and I want a man to be a man, and I want them to be gratified in the areas that they support and carry the burden for us. And I want to be satisfied in the area that I operate in that is uniquely mine, that I accept and I'm happy and I'm glad to accept. So, Black women, we got to drop this pride, and we have to drop our own egos that we have, and we have to allow a man to support and assist us. And it can be odd or scary or unusual, but we have to get out of this abnormal relationship that we have with men, specifically, I'm talking about our black man. Nobody wants us to be able to rely on our black man. Nobody wants us to be able to depend on our black man. We rely so much, black women and black children, on other men. How great would it be to be able to rely on our men? I mean, maybe, we can't do that right now on a large scale. I mean, I would love for our men to have supermarkets for us to go to. I would love, for our men to have to build gyms for us to go into and work and pools. And I would love that. However, in the absence of that, I at least let them carry a box, right? So this is just something to remind you and to remind myself to put down that I got it mentality. And I'll share one more story. I was in a hardware store and I was looking for I wanted a very sturdy rug for my house, for the entryway. And so I'm looking at these rugs and I'm lifting them and, they had a little bit of weight and, rugs can be kind of awkward. I'm lifting and I'm checking them out and I'm pulling this one out. And I must have pulled like 7 rugs out. So I wanted to make sure that I looked through them all to find the one that I needed. And I noticed there were people standing over to my right, but I was focused on the rugs. And I sensed someone coming closer, and I'm trying to get this rug, the one I finally chose in the cart. And this man says, "Sister, do you need help?" And I said, "Oh, yes, thank you." And I said, I want this. He said, "You want this one?" I said, "Yeah, I want this rug." And so he lifted it, he put it in my cart. And then all the other rugs that I took out and put on the floor, he put them back for me. And he said, "I'm happy to help." And he said, if my wife was out, I would want someone to help her too. Men just want to be needed sometimes, and we have to give them the space to be needed. And sometimes they have to be reminded that they're needed. And we have to be reminded that we need them. I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast, episode 159. It is a pleasure to be back with you. I missed you. I miss coming to the microphone and talking about interesting things and ideas and issues that are relevant to our community. And I pray that you are staying safe. I pray that you are healthy in these crazy, crazy times. And I know we're coming through this pandemic and the world is opening back up. However, let me caution you to continue taking all of the safety protocols, all of the safety measures that you are taking to keep you and your family safe. We don't know what's what for sure. So I want to encourage you to do everything that you can to defend against disease, to defend against infection, and to be healthy both physically and mentally. Thanks again for listening to this episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast. And until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, nurahmuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@nurahspeaks.com. You can also follow the Nurah Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nurah Speaks podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.